What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Non-Standard Podcast. I'm your host, Manny Lamson, and for this first episode, we go non-standard. We flip the script. My wife, Tara, is going to be the host. She's going to ask the questions to me for the intro episode. So again, really quick, what we dive into is sort of my growing up, what led me to sort of the leader I am today, what helped me come forth with this podcast, my leadership traits and techniques, and what to look forward to on future episodes with the podcast. Feel free to enjoy, share, and support the podcast with multiple ways. Obviously, you can share the episodes in the notes as well. Go follow myself on Instagram for now. And then when we get there, we'll have the Instagram for the Non-Standard Podcast as well. But simple ways, just share it if you like it, and let other people know how they can become a better leader.
All right. I think we are live.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for joining me on this first episode. Obviously, you just listened to the intro. Again, this is a non-standard podcast with my wife, Tara, doing the hosting portion of it, interviewing me on why I'm starting this instead of me just talking to you guys one-on-one on why I'm doing this. So she's got questions. Hopefully, I have the right answers, and hopefully you guys enjoy. And if there's anything you have after, please just follow along, share, do what you got to do. And then I'll give some more info after as well. All right, babe, it's all you.
All right. Well, when Manny wanted to get into this, I knew right away that this is going to be his niche. He loves talking and sharing stories. But the one thing that he kind of struggles with, in my opinion, is he's so humble that I don't know that his introduction about himself would have paid justice. So I felt like he needed somebody to kind of help narrate and ask him these questions to understand kind of what is the non-standard way and who he is and how hard of a worker he is. All right. With that being said, let's recap. Let's talk about young Manny. I know your dad gave you a nickname, Corning, and you can bring it back further than that. I know that you have kind of a neat story. So let's talk about young Manny from the beginning that led to who you are today.
Yeah, I think that's a great question because I think what a lot of people see on my social media right now is maybe the past like 5-year Manny or the military and on Manny or my transformation journey Manny. They don't see where I came from. So, you know, I say, even though it's non-standard, a normal life growing up from a small town in Northern California. I was originally born in Germany. My dad was in the military, met my mom over there. And then they moved back to the States where he went back to Northern California where he was from. So for me growing up, life, it was small. It was always small, from small town to small town, Northern California. Again, it's just me and my brother and my parents. You know, I say my middle school and lower are pretty normal. High school was different. I was social during high school, but not really the most popular kid. I was more of the funny, different kid. You know, my friends will tell you I didn't care how I dressed. I would have a Hawaiian short with plaid shorts and flip flops everywhere I go. I just recently got into trying to style a little better. But that's who I was in high school. I was just a fun kid to be around. But then I grew up in a small high school in a small town, so I was able to walk down our high school and know everybody, the different cliques, the different gangs. I say gangs like politely in Northern California, but you know, those groups that were there, the different groups in school, I knew everybody in every clique. The farmers, the sports kids, the band people, everything in between there. Walked out of the hall, so it was cool. I really enjoyed high school. It was a really fun time. I loved it. But it was a bubble, and I didn't know that until I joined the military. So I joined the military a year after high school, only because I didn't have the I guess the outward presence to go to a big college or go play sports. I broke my thumb my senior year playing high school baseball. There was no like a lot of film you could do back then. You had to do it all yourself. Growing up in a small town in Northern California, we had one close college. There's community college, not a lot of big colleges for recruiting. I think only 2 kids in my high school when I was there for my 4 years went to a college and played sports. So very rare. So it was sort of on the block, but baseball was my option. I couldn't do it. I didn't really want to stay close. Obviously, I wanted to expand. I wanted to go in the military just from a recruiter coming to high school. My dad helped me narrow it down to the Air Force when originally I wanted to go to the Army because that's really all I knew about. I took the ASVAB. I got open mechanics or something. He didn't want me to do that because he knew I'd get a job I didn't like. So we found a guaranteed job called SEER, which is the Survival Evasion Resistance Escape job, where my recruiter helped me get that job. And so that sort of set me up there. And then that was sort of the guidance from my parents going on out of high school. Like my dad worked, his whole life. I say, like even though he retired and moved down to Texas with us, he still works. And that's what I remember from my dad going to high school and growing up was, just him going to work, him coming home from work, him making time to play with us, cook a lot. Him and my mom cooked a lot. And we still do that to this day. And so I was really appreciative of that. But I never realized that until now, like what he did and how he did it as I try to pursue this balance of family life, passion, jobs, all this stuff as well. And, like he did some pretty cool stuff for us. He would take us to the gym in the morning before he'd go to work, drop me and my buddy Garrett off to high school workouts before. We'd go to the baseball field on the weekends and play catch. Even though in high school, he didn't really have to play catch with us. We could go out there by ourselves, but he would drive us out there. He'd support us. I think he was at all our games. Yeah, him and my parents or my mom and my grandparents were at all our games growing up. So that was really cool. Something we try to do to this day at a younger age for our kids. But yeah, so he instilled work ethic. Yeah, so it'd be cool to dive deep into that and talk to him later on that. But that was my high school experience. Very sports. I did a couple other things like FFA, just building and becoming a better person and just working. We went to school, we worked, we did homework, and that was it. My brother and I didn't drink on the weekends. We would go to our friends' parties and hang out. But, our parents instilled in us no drinking, no swearing all through high school. We watched film on Saturday morning with our coaches at their houses. I remember going to my linebacker coach's house and watching film with him while I was randomly dating his daughter at the time. So it was really funny, like hang out with her and then be watching film with her dad. So that was like a funny little story. And then, that was our high school. It was very, very bubble-ish. And then joining the military after was where I saw like, wow, there's a lot more to life. Moving to Spokane, where I was first stationed, was an eye-opener because that was a big city for me, like a city with lights, a downtown, a nightlife was new. Being on my own was new. I remember driving my Nissan Frontier from Gridley, California to Spokane, and just having like all my stuff in the back of that truck. And it wasn't a lot, but it was just that. And I drove it up there. I didn't have a room when I got up there, so everything stayed in my truck while I crashed in another guy, airman's room, getting up to Spokane after basic training. And then, I did the job. So for those that don't know, being an enlisted airman in the military, your focus is your job. That's how you progress. You're not really focused much on leadership. You're focused on doing the job. And that's what I did. I taught survival to air crew and I loved it. Being in the woods, teaching them how to survive, building up my self-confidence as an instructor, as the youngest kid on my team, right? So I was on a team of about 30 people when we graduated, through a pretty tough tech school, a lot of physical and mental training. But I made it with just a philosophy of just not quitting. That was literally all I told myself. Just don't quit. Just keep going one day after the next. And that sort of ties into where I'm at in my life now with where I'm going. But that's what started it. It's funny when I look back now at that Manny and I see where he was then and what he was doing, and I sort of don't appreciate it until now. And I go, man, he was doing a lot. He was the youngest kid in his class, coming from a small town, knew nothing about the military, knew nothing about survival, knew nothing about cold weather. And he moves to Spokane, never driven in the snow, having to teach officers and senior enlisted in the military how to evade, survive, and resist. And going through that tech school alone was pretty fun, but it built a brotherhood in me, which I loved from sports. So sports, doing SEER, I did that for 4 years. Obviously, we met when I was, I think, 2021. I was a senior airman. You were living in Spokane. So right before I was going to get ready to get out of the military to go to college, we had a lot of talks on what should I do after. You mentioned up to me, you should become an officer. You should do ROTC. So I had to figure out how
Well, you
that
should
worked.
dial that one back just a second. Tell them what you want to do.
I don't even know what I wanted to do.
You said, I'm going to work at a gym. I'm going to be a trainer.
Yeah, so I decided to get out of the military 2 years into the military. So I signed a 4-year enlisted contract. 2 years in, I wanted to go to college. I wanted to go play football. I wanted to go do sports because my brother was playing football at the time, 2 years below me at a college. And so I just knew I still could. And obviously it was different. So this is, I guess, the beginning of my non-standard path because I wanted to get out of the military and go to college, use the GI Bill and play football. That was like one of the ducks. Then when we talked, it was, hey, what else can I do? You're like, hey, you should become an officer. And I was like, I don't even, what is that? Like, honestly, like what do they do? Because being a SEER guy, you don't work with officers. I never worked with them. I didn't know what officers were or what jobs they had. But you mentioned ROTC, and so we dug into that. I went to the academy 3 years in the military and taught down there and got to work with the cadets down there and learn a little bit more of what an Air Force officer is. Then we started doing our research. So back then there was no education office to talk to about becoming an officer. There was no podcasting or social media to reach out to prior enlisted officers. Like I was pretty new into this. And I want to say I was at the beginning of this curve of airmen wanting to become officers on this path. So I knew of two different processes, OTS and ROTC. OTS, you have to submit an application, but you have to have college. I didn't have college. So that was like done. That one's done. That one's thrown to the side. ROTC was the next option. All we knew was you go to college, you take a class, you graduate, you become an officer. I was like, that's not bad. And so then we started digging into what colleges I should go to. Originally, we were trying to go back to California, so we visited Sac State, which was really nice. And then you had some opportunities to stay in Washington with your cop career. And so I was like, oh, that's easy. We'll look at Washington State, which was right down the road from us. It's a state college, very easy to get into. For me, some of the limiting factors was sports. If I wanted to play football, I had to have, I guess, a school that wasn't doing well so I could walk on. So I wasn't going to go to a big, good school like Oregon or UW that maybe weren't needing walk-ons at the time. So that's why Sac State was up there. They were D2, the Hornets. We could have done something there, but Washington State was coming off a bad season. So sort of then that just all lined up. We enrolled. This was 2006 is when I enlisted. 2010 is when I got out. But then on the side, so, you may not know, Tara was in the military as well as a reservist. And so she was stationed in McChord at the time in Seattle, Tacoma area. She ran into the SEER guy over there and just struck up we'll just say she struck up a conversation and asked him like, hey, do you need another SEER guy here? My husband's a SEER guy. Yeah. And so they said, yes, we would love to have another SEER guy. And so that was another option. How do I get out of the military, join the reserves, go to college, do ROTC, play football, do all this stuff, right? Just like crazy stuff. But, our philosophy was line up the ducks, right? We needed to line up the ducks to get to where we had to go. And our end goal was graduating to become an officer. That was sort of the end goal. What could I do in between that time? Well, I was shooting for the moon. I became a reservist, got out of my enlisted contract. The reserves are pretty easy to get into. You sort of just go over there and they sign some papers and you're reservist. I don't know how that process goes. There's probably something crazy going on in the background. But I became a reservist as a senior airman SEER guy, teaching their classes once a month with my wife. We would take the C-17 over there from McChord. At the same time, I'm a full-time student, taking full-time classes my freshman year, figuring out how I could play football. I couldn't walk on the fall of my freshman year, but they had tryouts the spring of my freshman year. So I knew that was coming up. At the time, you started working full-time as a loss prevention officer and other jobs to keep us afloat because we had an apartment. We had a small income from me, which was just my BAH for using the GI Bill. I think that's all I had. And then I worked at Les Schwab as well to try to make some money while you were working full-time. So that's a freshman year of college, 2010. Man, this is going to be a long story, but we'll try to keep it condensed. I walk onto the football team spring of 2010, my freshman year, not knowing what to expect. Obviously, I'm older than every player on the team. I'm just as old as the seniors. And so that's what I had going for me. I remember doing the tryouts and having a decent 40 time and working hard. And that's what the coach told me. They just wanted somebody to work hard. I didn't know what to expect. And then I get the call that I made it, I guess. It wasn't really a call. There was a letter on the door. You walked by their door and you saw the list of who made the walk-on, and my name was on that list. And it was pretty cool to see. I still am really good friends with that walk-on crew because that was my next brotherhood, was the football team. So I made the football team that spring. And that sort of kept me focused. So I'm playing football. I'm also doing rugby at the same time. I decided to do club rugby.
Well, tell them what position you played.
Yeah, so I walked on and they put me at running back, which I went to the running back coach right away and I was like, Coach, I've never played running back in my life. I was a wide receiver and a DB in
You're
high school.
considered one of the bigger guys then.
Yeah.
So tell them your
so
size then compared to now, and especially how many calories you had to eat back then. And
yeah, so I was about
we did have that limited budget.
Walking on as a running back. And he just told me, like, hey, you fit the mold for what we need on our team. They had a lot of scat running backs, so a lot smaller, quick running backs. They needed somebody on a walk-on style to do the job, and that was my job. So obviously, being 4 years after joining college, I knew I've watched a lot of college football, so I understood football very well compared to a lot of the younger kids. I was very smart in sports, so I knew what my role was. So I remember calling my brother, who was running back at the time at Linfield, and be like, dude, I don't know what to do. How do I like hold the ball? How do I like run or shoot? I was like, I don't know. Like, he's like, hey, just do what you got to do. Just run north and south. That's probably what they need you for. And that's what I had to do. That's all I had to do is run north and south. Walk on running back, just mimic the other running backs on other teams like Stanford and Oregon State and those guys and just have fun. And we did. But yeah, so full-time student, you're working full-time. I'm doing ROTC as well. So we have labs every Thursday. We have PT during the week. Working at Les Schwab in the evenings, I think. And then on the weekends.
Still don't know how you studied.
Yeah, I don't think I did. So the freshman year was pretty fun. It was cool. Going to the sophomore year, and that's where it gets busier. I'm expected to do more during ROTC. I'm expected to do more during football. We get a new football coach with Coach Mike Leach. Obviously he just passed away. So at the time I knew Mike Leach from coming from Texas Tech. I knew he was hard. He was gonna bring it. And that's what we needed at Washington State. So that flipped the script on my intensity and my time with college. So just the college athlete life is way more unappreciated than people think. It's underrated. You remember, so like my schedule was waking up at probably about 4:30, going to morning workouts to the walk-on because you usually had to work out first, and then going to training room, going to my first class usually around 8 or 9, then having lunch, and then going to another class, and then you had film at 2 and probably another workout, and then you had practice at 4 to 6, then you had film from maybe 6 to 8, and then you were going home trying to do homework, be in bed by 9, and then you were working nights, so we never saw each other. You would go to work, I'd come home. You'd come home, I'd go to school. And that's how we did those 4 years, and and I functioned very well being busy. I think you've seen it. When I'm not busy, and you're the same way, like when we're not busy, we're less productive. It's weird. So the busier we are, the more productive we are because we don't have time to mess around. And so that's how our college was. It was a blink of an eye. 4 years go by, I do 2.5 years of football. I do 3 years of rugby. I do a couple years of working at Les Schwab. Then I work part-time in another bar there at nights.
Give us a brief recap on when you did play rugby. I mean, you didn't know anything about rugby, so kind of give us how that came about.
Yeah, so I think I just saw like a random either rugby tryouts or I don't know if you remember. I don't know. Like I think it's just something I just saw.
I don't know. I don't remember. I just remember trying to understand the rules.
Oh no, I think Cameron, the guy who worked with Les Schwab, played rugby because he was the senior on the team. I don't even remember Cameron. And he told me about it, and so I just went out there. Never played in my life, and I loved it. It's phenomenal sport, very smart. You have to think on your feet. They call it a gentleman's sport for a reason because that's how it's played. So obviously, I'm learning rugby while learning college football. I wasn't really learning ROTC. I was prior enlisted, so my commander is really cool. He's like, you don't have to go to PTs. You don't have to go to the labs. Just show up to class, be a leader.
Well, you're an athlete as well, so I mean,
yeah.
I think he gave.
Yeah, so they were more nervous of me getting hurt and not getting to become an officer. I was just like, hey, I want to do this. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, rugby I actually did really good at. I wish I would have played more rugby and pursued that, which I still can, but I did really good. My first game, I think I scored 3 tries when we went to Boise State. I crushed some other teams when we played, and it was really fun. You just run straight.
Yeah, we went to some cold places. Yeah.
Yeah, we went to the Sevens tournament in Oregon. That was really fun. So the rugby community is amazing. I loved it. It's very close, very small. So yeah, those 4 years go by pretty quick. I managed to maintain a pretty decent GPA. I think it was like 3.5 or above. go to practice, do all that. There's struggles in between there that, later on episodes, dive down into on maybe the struggles and tough times of managing the time. But that helped me get really good at time without knowing it either. I didn't know I was good with my time then than I do now. But that helped me because I had to be really good with my time. I had to find those times to do studying when I had gaps in between classes, eat my nutrition. I was eating about 6,000 calories a day, which, you remember when I'd be tracking for a class, I'm eating bagels and banana and shakes after every workout, massive lunches going down to the nutrition bar after, tons of food, 6,000 calories a day. I can't even imagine eating 3,000 right now. That's insane. But I was trying to maintain about 200 pounds. And it was a pretty good 200 pounds. But yeah, I think that's good for the 4 years there. So obviously after that chunk of time, 2010 to 2014, we graduate. I get my commission slot as a CISO, Combat Systems Officer, to go to Pensacola, where we do our training there. So that's 2014, 2015, which, is another, that's not as busy. That was a pretty chill time, I'll say, in our life. We got to enjoy Florida. You got to get your yoga stuff. We got to, I think, enjoy time, as I guess a married couple, college is I don't know if that was our married time, because we were really busy. So, I guess we started adulting after college, doing fun stuff in Florida, having a good time down there. Obviously, Connor, our first kid, is born in Florida. That schooling goes by pretty well. A lot of leadership for me there. I won't dive too much into a lot of leadership stuff, more just the story. Then in 2015, in the military, we call it a drop night after training. So you have this big old party and event where you get what we call our aircraft that we're going to be assigned to for our career. So I get a B-1. We have no idea what it is. We Google it after. We don't know where Abilene, Texas is. We've never been to Texas, but we're looking forward to the Texas life. That was sort of where we were. We were like, Texas seems pretty fun. Let's do this. 9 years go by here in Texas. 1 year, the first year is all training at what we call the FTU, which stands for something training unit. It's just where you're a student. You learn about the B-1. I did not do well. It was really hard for me. Flying in general was tough because I didn't know much about like the mechanics, the way an aircraft is built. A lot of people, when it comes to the military and fly, they understand like cars, gravity. They've maybe flown before. I knew nothing. So that was a new type of studying for me. We had struggles going through that.
You learned so much on the fly. That was your first time having to actually get into the books and be questioned.
Very true. Yeah. So college being very easy and a breeze for me. CISO school wasn't very mentally difficult. Yeah. This was a gut check for me. Having to, like you say, study all night, learn something not that I wasn't good at, but I also didn't really know as well. So like, it's hard to learn something when you don't know it, and maybe you're not as passionate, right? Like I just don't know a lot about planes. Planes don't get me excited to learn about. So I was more just learning to memorize. So that was a struggle going through that. And it was hard because my class is really good too. It's when you're not the smartest and the brightest, it's definitely tough. And but it also pushed me as well. And that's why I love being in the B-1 community, or just a CISO. In the B-1, we call it a WISO, weapon system operator, where I'm in the back seat managing the systems of the jet and the navigation. And that's what kept me on my toes. It was just a challenge and it was really fun. So we go into the operational squadron of the 9th Bomb Squadron for 3 years, from about, we'll say 16 to 19. We have Connor, we have JoJo 2 years later, but you're working on your undergrad, you move, so you're doing school full time. I'm working full time as a new guy in a squadron, which means you're sort of working a lot. It was a very busy schedule. I was focused on being the best I could be in the jet, flying a lot, doing a lot of TDYs, multiple deployments. It was stressful. It was hard. I think I definitely let a lot of other things slack on the side, but it's hard to balance a lot of that stuff: family, relations, finances, work, and yourself. You sort of have to pick and choose throughout your life which one is going to be on top, which one sort of falls back. And I think at that time, health and wellness fell back, family fell back, but I'm trying to hack the mission, do that. So those deployments go by, one to Guam, one to Doha or Qatar. We call it the deed, where I was really, playing the game, like college sports, you practice to play the game on Saturday. In the military as a flyer, you practice all year long to deploy for 6 months and, rage hate on the bad guys. That's our job, is to drop bombs on bad guys and save good guys and eliminate those out there. So but you're training for almost a full year to two before you go do that for 6 months. So it's a lot of practice. We go and do that for 6 months and we crush it. We do a great job. I come back and there's other opportunities out there for me to become a better officer, which is why I commissioned. I commissioned to lead. And so I take that opportunity. This is probably one of the first non-standard things in my B1 community that I do, is take the leap outside of the flying community to go be a flight commander, not flying, but leading airmen. So I do this as a young captain, which is usually pretty rare. Usually you're staying in the flying squadron until maybe a senior captain before major when you go move on. I take this leap about 3 years early. It puts me behind on some flying stuff, but I had to balance it out. So then I become a flight commander and I love it. You saw it, working with the airmen, being with the airmen, watching them grow, watching them lead, watching them change. That's why I became an officer. It took me about 4 years to realize it, but once I got the grasp of it, I didn't want to let it go, so I dove all in. I had to put flying on the side and just manage what I could to stay consistent and current, but that wasn't my priority. My priority was my airmen, to help them live a better life and become better leaders. That's where I started learning how to become a better leader as well, because I had to lead. Being a flyer,
I'd also say, some of that, you wanting to help those airmen, was instilled, you probably don't realize it right now, but from your early on career of, man, if I would have just had that mentorship, what more could I have done? Would I have stayed in this career field a little bit longer? And I wrote on my notes a little side cap, but, you're very passionate of sharing what you like, and what you want to do. But let's talk about how in the military, how is that looked upon? How is that kind of, derailed you a little bit? And that's kind of what's pathed you're not on a traditional, train ride from A to B. You're kind of doing a couple of turns, because those blocks have kind of come into your way.
Yeah. Yes. So when you get in the Air Force, you have what we call a career roadmap, and they're very A to B. You go through upgrade training as a flyer, you go through instructor qual, you become an instructor, you go to the FTU to teach students, and then you sort of path out from either staff or weapons school officer, which we call WIC, and then you branch off from there to either commander or whatever. That's the normal path. Most people want to do it because it'll get you from A to B, it'll get you to colonel or whatever. That's usually the end goal for a lot of officers, right? 20 years colonel, cool. How do I do that? Here's a standard path. Go fly as much as you can, be great in the jet, take a couple deployments, go to weapons school, come back, be a patch, progress, which is fine for a lot of people. It works. There's a lot of them that do it. That's not what I wanted. So when I expressed that early in my career, it definitely pushed me aside of other opportunities. One opportunity got turned down to me because I wasn't the right person for the mold, and they were trying to get somebody else in there, which, hurt my feelings a little and pride. Then I tried to go to the academy, right, and teach there. You remember that process where I was interviewing for the academy? That got turned down on me because my answers weren't Air Force enough. They were what I wanted. So I was like, man, how many roads do I need to go down to find this journey I want to go on? And then I'm expressing like, hey, I don't want to fly as much. I don't want to go to weapons school. I don't want to do this. And at the whole time, the people in the Air Force, like, oh, you can't say that, or you can't do this. You need to do this to get to colonel, or you need to do this. I'm like, no. Bluntly, no. Like, that's how a lot of those conversations went. It definitely rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, but for me to have a family I wanted to grow up with and be successful with and be happy with, and my family to see me be happy in what I'm doing, I want to do what I want. And so that's what led me to this opportunity as a flight commander, that non-standard path of, I'm going to leave flying and do what we took a gamble, right? I took a gamble on pursuing my passion of leading people to put flying on the side. Will it hinder my career? I don't think so, because where it's led me so far, what's this, 4 or 5 years, man, 5 years later, I I'm happy I did that. I have no regrets of sticking to the flying or doing this. So yes, when you express your opinions in the military and they're different, most people will recluse and go back to the Air Force path because it's the path of least resistance. It's easy.
Mhm.
Go fly, go be an instructor, which some people are great at it. And I knew great people that did it. But I knew there were a lot of people around me that only did it because they were afraid that's the only way they can go. And I saw them sort of deteriorate and not be as happy. And I was like, man, that's where I would be. What can I do to help my family, help me go the way
And
I want
what's
to
the
go?
longevity? What's the longevity of those that
Yeah.
have done that? I mean, if you think about it,
Yeah.
most
Those
of our
that went that path that
our
didn't want
friends are.
to,
I know.
they're out. Yeah. And they
Yeah.
were amazing flyers. I have very, very good friends of mine that were some of the best flyers I ever had, not in the military anymore. And it
Hmm.
hurts. Like, I hate
Yeah.
talking about it because, like we got to know them and I wish they would have stayed in because they were so great. But just that, the, I don't know, just what we were, where we were at time in the people around us didn't help. So yeah, so when I took this gamble, this risk, this non-standard dark path of I don't know where I'm going to be in 2 or 3 years, where were we going? But um, it allowed me to open up my leadership toolbox, get me to where we are now, and during those years as a flight commander, allowed me to focus on myself. And so I was a flight commander for a couple years where I focused on my flight, which I think leads us into focusing on me. In 2021, I take this crazy journey, right? Which a lot of you guys, when you go on my social media, you'll see that journey because it's crazy. Um, I don't know. What do you think, babe?
Well, right after COVID, I think originally I wanted to do the challenge, but I am not as persistent as you. And like you just kept going with it, and I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, here we are." And what challenge we're talking about is the 75 hard challenge. And since I mean, I've been so busy with grad school, and I have all the other excuses in the book. And Manny will talk about the persistence and a true goal setter. Doesn't let those excuses come in the way. But I mean, I'll own up to it, especially with the kiddos and stuff. So I'm just adding my excuses. But Manny just kept being persistent. And I was like, oh, surely he'll back down and this will all end. And then now we've got like 3 scales in the kitchen for measuring food. He wants to know everything and anything that's in anything we eat. And it's great. Even the kids are like, how many calories are in that? So um, that's been a good change. But since doing that, he recognized how he was fueling his body on the inside. And then kind of, I don't know if you want to tap into it. That was my kind of follow on question, was how your mental character and beliefs have changed. And I think that you starting this self journey on rejuvenating yourself and saying, you know what, like I can follow the Air Force and what the Air Force wants me to do. I could follow what, hey, my wife wants me to continue to have a job, but I know that if I don't take care of myself, I'm not going to go anywhere. And so since you've been doing that piece of, taking care of yourself, mentally and physically, I mean, I've just seen kind of a 180 change, and it's kind of a light that I don't know that if you even notice that you portray on yourself, where others are like, "Hey, what's different? What are you doing? Tell me your secret." And you're like, "Hey, this isn't something that happened overnight." It's so 2021. So you've been going on it for, oh, well, we're in 24. So 3.5 years, I'd say, since you started that challenge and started that path, right?
Yeah, April 2021. So going on 3 years.
Yeah.
Um, so this sort of started right when we talked about non-standard paths. So I started working for First Form, a supplement company, in 2016. Randomly, I don't know if you remember that call at the state park where Cody called me and was asking me those questions about, I guess, becoming a Legionnaire for First Form. And I didn't think much about it at the time. It was just an opportunity, right, to pursue a passion I
Mhm.
have, which is exercise, health, and wellness. I got my undergrad in it. I got my master's in it. I was trying to figure out ways to do more, but still be in the military and still be active. What's better than being an online Legionnaire ambassador for a supplement company that has great morals, great background, great people, and just overall just amazing stuff. So that was in 2016. I was taking their products, trying to do what I could on the side. And then in 21, my new coach, Jake, calls me and, relights that fire. And that's really what he was doing, just calling to see how I'm doing as a Legionnaire. I wasn't really doing anything. I was just focusing on the military. But he sort of challenged me, right? Like, hey, start your Facebook group, get back in the app, start your training in the first form stuff, do better, right? Lead by example. You want to help people, or are you helping yourself? And I'm like, dang it, Jake, you're right, dude. So then, that sort of opened up that window of, man, all these other possibilities. So then I go to the Summer Smash that year, and you're probably like, why is he going to St. Louis for these 3 days to go hang out with all these people? But that community is really what I needed. It's what I've missed from the SEER community. It's a brotherhood of people that are pushing themselves every day. Core values, right? Leading by example, building relationships off trust and care, dude, everything. They provided me much more leadership than I've gotten in my 16 years in the military at that time. And that's that. And their big thing was to be selfless. You have to be selfish. And that's huge. And that's what you just talked about. For me to help my flight at the time, I was helping my flight, but I wasn't helping myself. I was up to 215 pounds. I wasn't big. I was strong. I just say I was strong. I wasn't over. I don't know if I was over. Technically, I'm overweight for my size, but I wasn't me. I was making excuses. I can eat whatever I want. I can drink whatever I want as long as I lift, right? The basic thing most guys do. But once I figured out, like, man, for me to be the best leader, I need to be a leader for myself. Not like the simplest concept ever. When people realize that and they do it, it turns a switch in their mind of, man, this is how you should lead. And so that journey started in April 21. I did 75 hard coming back from Summer Smash. I continued, like you said, I think that's the concept we see in America is we see people do things knowing they're going to stop, knowing they're going to fail, knowing they're going to quit, knowing they're going to get bored. That's how America is ran these days. And it's horrible. Like, we don't believe in somebody to get it done. We believe they're going to stop. Like, that's just, it's crazy to call that standard. So I took the non-standard path, and I went all in. I did 75 hard. I did the Live Hard program, made it all the way up to phase 3. And we'll dive into that probably in another episode when I talk to somebody about 75 hard as well. That year, it's hard for me to look back at that year because I feel like I wasted every year before that. But I can't say that because every year before that led me to that year to change my life. So, without those 35 years prior leading up to this year of not being the best I can be, wouldn't have allowed me to become the best version of myself. And I'm still becoming the best version of myself. I don't think I'm there yet.
I think that's how we grow. I mean, think of a tree. I think of extended branches. I mean, this branch led me to reach higher, into here. And so, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where things may have shifted for you and the light kind of turned on. But I think it was always instilled there.
Yeah. And I do credit a lot to my growing up, which I never realized until you go through it, right? So I look back at my past and I think, man, I look at how I played sports, very much the same. I was all like heart, no talent sort of player, I was really work ethic oriented. That led me here, I did a lot of different things in high school. It opened up my eyes, like FFA, which I wasn't familiar with, working at Les Schwab as a kid, doing things like that. The SEER job really helped me because that took me out of my comfort zone. Obviously, another non-standard job in the military. Being around guys that opened my eyes to life. I have really good friends that I went through tech school with that I'm still friends to this day that I've known for since 2006. So going on 18 years. A couple guys that are, close to my mentors and idols in the military. And so that was those past 2 years, which leads us to here. Doing a podcast. Who would have thought, I'm diving into the podcast world, and that is a whole venture on its own because we talk about reading, self-development, learning every day. That's why, because I want to provide my leadership traits, my leadership philosophy that I've established that a lot of my podcast episodes are going to dive deep into when we compare them with other people's leadership philosophies, leadership traits. And these people aren't going to be just in the military. I'm going to, I want to have people that are sports people that work in businesses, other companies, spouses, because leadership is at all levels. A lot of people, I feel like when people hear leadership, they think military. Because that's just like, I guess, what people think of as military, right? You're a leader. but I want to take those traits and apply them to other people as well in other jobs. Because then I can take those from those jobs and apply it to the military as well.
Something
Right?
about leadership that I learned from that Coaches and Sidelines program that we're a part of is everyone is a leader, right? Not just one person. And so everyone brings something different to the table. And everyone really doesn't know it, but instinctively has this kind of non-standard path of what drives them, and ultimately that's what's going to get you to your goals because it's what your passion is, right? So when you talk about health and fitness, we can't make somebody eat something, right? They've got to have that willpower, like, no, I want to eat healthier. I want to start, tracking. I want to start, watching what I eat, getting into the gym. You can't force feed somebody, right? It's got to be kind of from that within. And I think that that's something that you're really starting to hone in on and share with others. And so I'm excited to see how this podcast goes. Like you said, not just talking about military leadership styles, but all of the other people we know. So we think of athletes, fitness professionals. I would even say spiritual leaders and mentors that we've met through church and through our small groups and through other. I mean, Abilene's been a unique community in that aspect that we have all these other different social groups. And if you just take a step back, it's kind of interesting to see all different types of where people are. And even if you aren't kind of leading per se somebody, what are some things that you think makes that person still a leader? So if they're not in a leadership position, like in charge of a flight or, in charge of a command or something like that, what makes that young airman still a leader?
Yeah. How to lead when you're not a leader. And that is good. That's my number one leadership philosophy. Just lead by example. Lead in the things you can do. If that's
Mm-hmm.
showing up to work professionally on time, you're leading. If that's getting a task done on time above the standards, that's leading. If it's taking out the trash when
Not
nobody else taking
settling.
out the trash, that's leading. If it's
Mhm.
doing things outside of your workplace to get better, like
Yes.
learning a new language, when your job doesn't
Mm-hmm.
require it. I say working on your health and fitness because that's one of the most obvious forms of leadership you can do that people will notice.
Mm-hmm.
And they will see that you are leading your own life. Um, and in return, people will look up to you to be their leader. So while you're not trying to lead, you're leading. And that's huge. And I think you hit it pretty good on the nail on the head is um, everybody's a leader. Everybody has their own leadership traits. I have my own leadership traits. I will talk about a lot of those in this podcast. I have a book of them with 28 of them so far that I've stolen, I've borrowed. I've come to understand like, oh, that's what I'm doing. It's that leadership trait. And that's what I love discussing with people is when they talk to me, I go, that's a leadership trait. And they go, oh, okay, that's cool. I didn't know that, or like, hey, what you're doing there is leadership. Oh, okay. Um, taking the extra step. Yeah,
Getting uncomfortable, you'd say as well, right? I mean, that's
yeah,
how you challenge yourself.
doing things that are non-standard or uncomfortable. Is it, and that's number 4 of my leadership philosophy. Challenge the road in front of you by getting comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's how we grow. That's how we lead. That's how we change. Things will never change if you do the same thing. The military's horrible at that. We have the same hairstyle for the past 50 years. We are just now allowing people to express their hair, express their mustache. It's 50 years later. None of this applies to how I become a person or do my job.
Well, the uniform too, or I mean, gosh, it hasn't changed in a while.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, the at least the dress blues,
but
but
yeah, yes. So to lead is to change. You will never see a successful leader do the same thing or be doing the same thing to become successful. All successful people have either failed, so that's another huge thing is become a leader.
all right,
Is you have
yeah,
to
yeah,
fail.
yeah.
No successful leader has ever been successful. Nobody's ever gotten all straight A's and probably become successful. They probably made it pretty far, but then they hit probably a challenge later on in their life. So yeah, challenges, doing hard things, um, and failing. Yeah.
Let's start to wrap up. I just want to put you on the spot right here, and I think it would be important to kind of solidify the definition of this. But can you define what non-standard is? I know you weren't ready for this one.
I know, and it's good to know because if somebody's gonna
But
ask me
I
like, "Hey,"
mean, we
yeah,
we understand it. I think that we know the standard regulations. We think of military.
yep,
This is what you follow. Here are the rules. So, I mean, what does non-standard mean to
yeah.
you?
So
Is it
those
just
that
about
aren't
you?
in the military may not understand that concept. In the military, we throw the word standard around a lot. Hey,
A
this is
lot.
standard procedures. This is
Mhm.
standard how
Standard
you
protocol.
PT. Yeah. So I don't even think non-standard is technically a word, but we use it as doing something different. So I were to express or say what is non-standard, it's not breaking the rules, right? Because that would be different or not the right way. It's challenging the
Mhm.
rules, challenging the path in front of you to make your own path. Um, there are so many ways to make your own path that are it, and that's why I say make your own, not follow a new one. Um, take a curve and then get back on the path. Like you are making your own path. That's non-standard. Because we are humans, we go by the path of least
Love it.
resistance. We
Yeah.
follow what other people are doing in front of us because that's how we think we have to get there. I don't want to get to a spot in my life and say I got there because somebody else did it or I followed this guy's path, which that's just how I'm built. There are probably other people who have gotten there who have
I
done
mean, you
that.
could be inspired by other people's paths. I
Yeah,
think that that's the way to get towards a further direction. Is hey, how did you get there? But still paving your own way, your own hard work.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think
Yeah.
as more people do this, it'll become the standard, right? Like the standard will be challenging the norms, challenging
Hmm.
the standard. That's just that I that's how I want everybody to lead is challenging what's in front of them. So yeah, so non-standard was making your own path. Um,
I like
yes,
it.
which is hard because you're running into the dark, you're running into the night, you don't know where you're going, um, and you're going to be alone.
I don't want to say all that. I think that you know where you're going, and I think that you should talk about. I mean, yeah, leading into future podcasts, how you make that decision to kind of go off into that other direction. It's not just on a wild hair whim. It's part of that goal setting. It's that desire. It's that challenge. It's
Yeah,
that, hey, this is where my passion is. This is what I'm interested in doing. How am I going to get there? I'm going to track my way. I'm going to take these steps. So I wouldn't say it's just something you just kind of make that decision to just take that quick left turn.
yeah. I
But
think it's definitely it's a left turn you've seen for a long time. You know it's up there. You know it's coming, and you're getting ready to take it.
it's
So,
like
like you
seeing the
said,
Bucky sign
you're
360
taking
miles
you're
when
taking
it's
the
Bucky.
small steps to get to the Bucky sign. You
Okay.
start small, right? If it's managing your health, it's tracking your food. If it's learning a new language, it's getting into an app. If it's getting, starting a new business, it's Googling how to start a new business. You take the small steps, and then when you see the sign, you're ready to take that turn. You've done the proper steps, you've done the proper procedures to do your non-standard path. But definitely start small.
All right. Well, I like it. Well, I'm excited for you and what you have in store. I know you got some big headliners coming up in your next future episodes, our son being one of them. So that should be an interesting um, podcast to listen to, kind of on his perspective. I'm interested to see how he sees you, how he defines quote leadership, and some maybe ethics or beliefs as parents. Hopefully, we'll see how that portrayals. But in the future, just talking about all these different aspects, right? So the military, we talked about all these different other social groups that we're a part of, that you're going to tackle into, and just continue to define what leadership is, how somebody, it not necessarily has to be driving for that leadership role or goal, but how do they self-revere and take care of themselves, right? So not being complacent, making that time for change. And that's why I'm excited to kind of hear more of what you have to share.
Perfect. You wrapped it up perfect.
All right. Well, we'll take care. We'll end this with our whippity whip.
There you go.